And when we look at the journey of an entrepreneur, I've been through it myself. You go from trying to survive to thriving to a bit of payback to maximizing value to now this transition of give back. Yeah, look, we work really hard as entrepreneurs, but the problem is we're working in the business, not on it. And this is very strategic around how do you plan to maximize not only the value at exit, but minimize the tax. And while structures might not be as sexy as they sound, it's definitely very sexy to not have to pay as much tax. And, to make sure that as much as possible can be in your pocket to do both things, either plan for your next investment, set up your family, and start doing some of those philanthropic endeavors that are so important to you. And when we look at the journey of an entrepreneur, I've been through it myself. You go from trying to survive to thriving to a bit of payback to maximizing value to now this transition of give back. And there's so much more you can do, right, Jeff, if you plan that right. Mm-hmm. And really you can step into that next phase of your entrepreneurial journey, which is the give back.
Absolutely. And I think some of the things we also see as well is, let's say if there's going to be that second bite at the apple for some of these folks that may be exiting. So for example, if I tried to step in and take over your business, they're going to say, Jeff, who? They don't know me from that perspective. And so, being able to say, if I was your successor in that case, Tamara's going to be staying on board for the next couple of years as a transition to warm that up for me. That has a whole lot more value than just you hand me the keys on Friday and on Monday, the business is mine. And so we look at that and design that into part of the strategy as well and saying who needs to be along for the ride? Who are those key folks that are going to be critical? And maybe the founder themselves. Again, that may give them a second or even a third bite at the apple as they go about that. Mm-hmm. And then when we go about that, we also want to plan for just in case anything goes wrong in that situation. Let's say if I was the successor in this story, but I get hit by the proverbial donut truck or I'm now incapacitated. That plan has changed dramatically as well as the value of that plan to be able to say, how do we defend against that? And so there's some very cost-effective ways that we can design, whether it's insurance strategies, trust strategies, other things to build shock absorbers to the exit to make sure that there's always a funded exit, even if it doesn't go according to plan.
Yeah, we like to control as much as possible as the leaders and entrepreneurs, but there's always those moments, and we see that, right? In forum, you get those horrible events that might happen. A business partner needs to exit, but how we structure things is really important. It's not how you get into trouble, it's how you get out. I sleep very well at night knowing that you've structured everything right in case these things happen. And most importantly, my business partner, Natalie, who you know well, doesn't end up being in business with my husband. They get along well, but they certainly wouldn't make good business partners. So, thinking all these things through was really important because I've still got teenage kids and I want to make sure that people are taken care of. We have hundreds of staff. We want to make sure that they have a really solid business to continue to grow. So these are the sorts of conversations you're having with entrepreneurs, correct? Around these structures, around not only tax minimization, but also around what structures we need to have in place in case the event of something happening.
Exactly. And to your point there, maybe just on different timeline. I hope I'm retiring sooner than our Chief Investment Officer, Alec. He's 29. Or say, as we've also seen in the news here lately, at the Coldplay concert, I'll leave it at that. In that particular case, somebody's going to walk away with half of a business in that particular story.
Silly chess move.
Exactly. And how do you account for those kinds of things where just, some bad decisions can get made? How do you make sure it doesn't take the business or the investment behind it?
Yeah, great. Now, the theme of this is exit like a billionaire. So if we're thinking like a billionaire, if we look at people like Mark Cuban, they really leverage what you're talking about here. They're highly strategic in how they structure things, how they maximize their valuation at exit, and how they reinvest that. And they've gone on to, be extremely philanthropic in their endeavors. The problem with that, Jeff, is that there's not many billionaires. So how do we, with companies that are turning over 50 or 100 mil or 200 mil, how do we take some of the strategies that they've done and apply that so that we can also do more with the money, both philanthropic and for our families and team members? Like, talk me through the billionaire's mindset around how they structure this.
Absolutely. Well, some of the things that we look at that, and that's the great thing about it, is 80 to 90% of the ideas are incredibly scalable. So it doesn't matter if it's the $10 million business or the $10 billion business. A lot of these same ideas apply. And so that's what we look at and say, let's have that same mindset, because it's not so much what do you sell the business for, it's how much do you actually walk away with. And so that's where the tax strategies, the philanthropic strategies, the multi-generational strategies can come into play and say, are we designing things in such as charitable trust strategies? Some of these charitable trust strategies can be set up so that they have sort of a boomerang effect. I got to play off the Australian piece there, right? In case we love to refer to the charitable lead trust, for example, as something that says, hey, we're going to do some good for a while. Because if I have my big liquidity event, now all of a sudden, if I passed away tomorrow, there's a 40% estate tax waiting for my family in some circumstances. If I've had my $100 million exit and I can exclude maybe between my wife and I $28 million, there's still $72 million exposed and a 40% tax. So there's roughly a $30 million tax bill waiting that's got to be paid in 9 months. So some of the things we can start to do are the insurance strategies we talked about. They can also be these charitable trust strategies where I start to get that out of the estate through gifting approaches and say, hey, here's the causes I care about. We're going to boomerang the money out, have it come out 5, 10, 15 years later back to the kids. But in the meantime, we're doing a lot of good in that case, where it may be supporting some key organizations that we love and want to see get catapulted forward. It also gives those organizations some predictable income that they can count on, because most organizations on the charitable side, they're kind of doing the year-by-year hunt to say, okay, how do we keep this thing afloat? How do we keep this thing running? Now, if they have stability in their operations and their planning, how much more could they be able to do? And then later on, when the kids are ready to receive those funds, they boomerang back in to the next generation. But in the meantime, I've gotten it out of my taxable estate. So there's a lot of ideas like that. We look at, again, other ways that can be structured. Things, for example, where you might want to engage in what's called estate freezing, where we start to take certain assets and ownership of stocks, for example, company equity, and we start to put that into different trust vehicles, because that, again, can allow a lot of the growth or the explosion of the growth to escape some of the tax liability, because we're now spreading it across a trust or multiple individuals that are benefiting from the trust. And so now we've got a much bigger pool to spread those gains across. Some of the strategies that they might look at there. And then there are others where you say, hey, look, I don't have the $10 billion exit. I'm really going to be counting on this. Some of that can be structured through different types of annuity vehicles that can postpone some of the taxation of some of the benefits of that. Others can also be done through charitable remainder trust, where they give an income stream for a while and to support, maybe a generation or two. But then there's a remainder that does go later on down the road to a nonprofit organization. We've also seen folks structure licensing of their intellectual property. They may sell the primary business, but keep the intellectual property and license and give royalties off of that, or even do gifting off the royalties that come from that IP. So a lot of different things that can be done there.